Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats weekly podcast episode number 50. I am your host Dan Matson, aka Wooden Boat Dan, and this is the world's first podcast fully 110% dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, tradition, and romance of wooden boats and vessels of all sizes and shapes. Welcome to the show, folks. Today is episode number 50. I can't believe it. Coming up on 1 year anniversary in a couple weeks, so that's pretty exciting. If you're new to the show, I hope you enjoy it. We've got, most of the shows are about 30 to 60 minutes in length, usually involve an interview, and I do a little introduction and an outroduction. Not sure if outroduction is in the dictionary or not, but you know, these days anything goes, right, as far as abbreviations and words and things like that. Well, today's featured segment is SCAMP Camp Part 2. The first SCAMP Camp was held a couple weeks ago in Port Townsend, Washington. If you're not familiar with the SCAMP, it's an 11-foot, 11-inch micro cruiser. It's a balanced lug rig boat that was designed by John Welsford, and it holds water ballast, and it's a real seaworthy little rig. And so they had a SCAMP Camp to build some of these in Port Townsend. And I interviewed John Welsford, the designer of the boat. We talked more about the SCAMP in depth. And then Cliff Sell, who was one of the students there from Germany for this 2-week class. So stick around. I think you're going to like the interview. If you would like to connect with me, you can email me, dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. You can subscribe to my e-news list by going to hookedonwoodenboats.com/subscribe. You can leave comments on my website under my blog post. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest under Wooden Boat Dan. I would love it if you'd send pictures and stories. And you can also call my voicemail feedback hotline at 424-261-2360. And you can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. In the podcast section, if you search for Hooked on Wooden Boats, you can look me up there. Or you can go to my website and click on the little orange RSS feed button. That takes you to another page that allows you to subscribe, so you can have the content of this podcast automatically downloaded to your computer or your personal media player. Well, the wooden boat tip of the week this week is to consider using a lower maintenance alternative to varnish for small amounts of bright work. So let's say you're building a boat and it's mostly going to be painted, but maybe you want some nice, some gunnels out of mahogany or some other real nice looking wood, but you don't want the maintenance of varnish. There are some alternatives out there. One is what the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building calls their summer boat sauce, which is a mixture of a half a pint of inexpensive varnish, a quarter cup to a half a pint of real, not synthetic, pine tar for coloring, and then 1 gallon of sea-fin teak oil. And you want to apply this in warm weather. You put on a coat and you wait for it to kind of cure out in the sun, and then you stick on another coat and you apply like 3 or 4 coats. And the sun polymerizes the pine tar, so that's why you want the boat out in the sun. Otherwise the finish will stay tacky. So I'm going to post this recipe on the website this week, so you can take a look at that. The other thing, and then with this, you can just recoat it once a year, just clean it off a little bit and recoat it. the other thing, I was talking to Wayne Chimeni last month in Port Townsend, and Wayne uses straight penetrol on the gunnels of his boats, like the Dragon boat they use at the community boat building school there, and it looks really nice. It doesn't have the look of a true varnish, obviously, but it's a lot lower maintenance, and it brings the color of the wood out and looks really sharp. So if you want something a little bit lower maintenance, consider doing something like that. Well, this last week I've been working on my canoe again. Wow, this last, you think the boat's basically together. I could put it in the water and use it, but I've got to get my trim on my decks finished and got to get the boat painted and varnished. And man, that process takes a long time. Most recently, I trimmed my decks with some Purple Heart and some real small pieces that go around the Akumi plywood deck pieces themselves. And at the very tips, I tried to steam the Purple Heart, and the stuff just wouldn't bend very well. So at the very tips, I needed to fill in a little bit there, a gap. So I took some sanding dust from my Purple Heart and I mixed it with epoxy, and I was so proud of myself, and I filled in the little gaps very carefully. And the next morning I go out, and it's, by golly, the epoxy is not quite dry. It's a little tacky. Well, a couple hours later it's still tacky, and it's been like 12, 14 hours. So I get my West Systems book out for problem solving, and it's like, okay, I didn't mix the epoxy thoroughly enough. So that's a bummer. So I had to take the epoxy out, which is a real pain, and I had to redo it, and it took me probably a couple hours. So case in point here, I think my first wooden boat tip of the week a couple weeks ago was patience is a virtue. You got to be patient when you're mixing your epoxy. If you don't get it mixed fully, it's not going to cure, folks, and it's not going to be pretty. My rule of thumb is to mix it for 2 minutes straight. I think that's a guideline I read somewhere, and that usually works. Also, if you keep your epoxy warm, it's a little bit thinner when you mix it, and it mixes better. And I think I mentioned before, I have a little epoxy locker with a light bulb in it. Yeah, it keeps the epoxy warm, and I use that. So anyway, be sure and mix your epoxy well. So I got that done. So now I've got to sand those down. And then my next step on the canoe is to finish putting 2 coats of epoxy inside the boat. Then I'll start painting the hull outside. And after I prime it and get it all ready so it looks real pretty. And then I decided to varnish the inside of the boat and the gunnels, which originally I was going to paint it, but I just thought, oh, there's so much nice wood on this thing. I just want that extra maintenance over the next 20 years, right? Anyway, it'll look good. So that's the update on the canoe. I would like to give a shout out to a new subscriber this week, Paul Atkins from Australia. Paul, thanks for joining my e-news subscription list. And also, I'd like to read an email that Paul sent to me, a very kind email. So here's what Paul has to say. Hi, Dan. I just finished listening to your latest podcast and really enjoyed it. I only stumbled across it recently. Well done. I'll be catching up on back episodes as I build my Norwalk Island Sharpie 26-foot, just as John Welsford, recommended in the evenings after dinner. This will be the second boat I have built from scratch. I have also owned several others. The first was built at Duck Flat Wooden Boats in South Australia in a night school under the tutelage of Robert. Now, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, so I'm going to spell it Ayliffe, now of Stray Dog Boat Works, and David Wilson. The boat is a pretty little Ian Outred Willie boat, which brings me to my recommendations for interview subjects. So he's got some folks here he recommends I interview: Ian Outred, Bruce Kirby, Robert Ayliffe, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, David Wilson, and Michael Storer, who's an Aussie designer. Well, thanks again. You really hit the mark with your efforts. Keep up the great work. Paul Atkins. Paul lives in Kent Town, South Australia. Thanks for that note, Paul. I really appreciate the feedback. And I've added those folks to my list for future interviews. And I appreciate you connecting with me. So have a great week, Paul. Keep me posted on your boat progress, if you would. Well, upcoming here in 2 weeks is the Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival in Port Townsend, Washington, September 7th through the 9th. It's a big festival here on the West Coast, and it's a lot of fun. I will be there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And on Sunday, I'm going to be presenting at 10:45 in the red building of the Northwest Maritime Center in the Discovery Room. I would love it if you would come to the presentation and I get a chance to meet you. That would be really cool. I'm going to be raffling off a couple things, some of my Hooked on Wooden Boats stuff from the store, t-shirt, hat, and mug. I'm going to be talking about my history with wooden boats, talking about the podcast, some of the people I've interviewed. It's going to be a really fun time, so please come to that presentation, and if I miss you there, just check in with me somewhere else. That would be really awesome. We're going to move on to the SCAMP Camp Part 2 interviews now. The first interview will be with John Welsford, and I'm going to go right from that interview to the interview with Cliff Sell, who was a student at the SCAMP Camp. So take it away, John. You know, before we start the interview, I want to cut in here and add a couple things that I forgot to say. Take me just a minute here. First of all, during the Wooden Boat Festival, I'm going to have the privilege to interview John Harris, the owner of CLC Boats, Chesapeake Light Craft, back in Maryland. I'm looking forward to that. That'll be on a future episode. And also, Lynn and Larry Pardee, who are lifetime sailors, adventurers, have built wooden boats, sailed motorless around the world for years, and they've written a lot of books and stuff, so I'm going to be interviewing them on Thursday, September 6th, and that'll be coming up on a future podcast also. Also, I wanted to mention that in Wooden Boat Magazine number 228, which just came out, I think it's the July-August issue, actually September-October issue. There's an article there about Sam Devlin, who's a designer and builder from Olympia, Washington. It's a great article, and interestingly enough, it was written by Larry Cheek, who I interviewed for one of my podcasts. In fact, I'm going to look that up here in a second. Also, Sam Devlin, I interviewed for podcast number 20. So if you want to listen to that, you can go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/020. And hang on just a second, I'm going to look up the other podcast for Larry. I am back, and the podcast with Larry Cheek, the author of that Wooden Boat Magazine article, is Hooked on Wooden Boats 013. So if you go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/013, you can listen to that podcast. And it's a great article in Wooden Boat Magazine about SAM, so I would encourage you to read that. We're going to move on to the interviews now with John Welsford and Cliff Sell. Take it away, John. Okay, it is August 9th. I'm with John Welsford again. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
We just talked last Saturday at the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building's 31st anniversary. Now it's 4 days later at the SCAMP class, day 4. So, SCAMP Camp, I guess, officially is what it's called. So how's it going so far, John?
It's amazing. It's intense. It's moving very quickly. The guys are making friends with each other really, really well. It's bonding into a really neat little group of people. The boats are progressing really well. There's lots of skills being learned. And by hell, we're busy.
Yeah.
There's 4 instructors in there and our feet are hardly touching the ground.
So how many boats are being built in there?
There's 10 boats being built in there.
Yeah.
One's being built by a gentleman who's not part of the course, and he started off a little bit ahead of us so we could use him as an example.
Oh, really?
Now, the class has actually overtaken him.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how far along is the class in the construction of the boat?
Okay, right now we have all the frames up on nearly all of the boats. There's only one to go. We'll have all the frames up. The forward transom on, the seat fronts in, the off-center cases are done, and they're coated inside. The doublers are going on those, and we're looking very shortly at putting the stern transom on. Bear in mind it's got a bow and a stern transom. Mm-hmm. This is a blunt boat.
Mm-hmm.
And then tomorrow we should be putting the lower plank on. Now, a couple of the instructors quietly walked off with all the lower plank parts and scarfed them up today.
Oh.
So they'll be all set for tomorrow.
Nice.
And this is part of what we're doing as instructors, is we're putting a little bit of time into preparing parts ahead of time. Even things like glue sticks, because the guys can't run the power machinery here. So we go off and we'll make a bundle of glue sticks, or we'll make templates and then run all the bevels on something, on the jointer, those sorts of things. We're joining up componentry ahead of time just to keep it flowing.
Mm-hmm.
But with 4 instructors and 10 pupils, we can do that.
Yeah, very cool. And so all the frames on this boat are plywood, marine plywood.
Yep.
Right.
There's very little solid wood in the whole boat.
Yeah.
Just a case end logs and a few cleats.
Right.
A couple of stringers up around the gunnel.
Yeah. And for those that are listening who don't know, this boat was your design.
This boat was my design.
Ordered through Josh Colvin of Small Craft Advisor magazine.
Yep.
And so, John, one question I meant to ask you last week about the SCAMP is, what is the effect of having a pram bow on a boat, other than the fact that you have more volume up to that point than the same length boat that's traditionally built? What else does that do for a boat?
Okay, it straightens the lines up so that there isn't that very sharp curve up in the bow. It makes it much easier to build.
Okay.
It has more volume out wide in the forward sections, which contributes to its high angle stability. Makes it much easier to right from a knockdown, much less likely to be knocked down. There's more volume in the forward end of the boat for storage. The conventional stem assembly is heavier. You need to keep the weight out of the ends of the boats.
I thought about that.
There's issues around the boat pitching, so it doesn't dive into a wave and not bob up again.
Oh.
There's lots more buoyancy up forwards. And they're all interrelated. All of these benefits are interrelated.
Yeah.
Now, if you change the pram bow, SCAMP wouldn't work nearly as well as it does. It's unusually wide for its length. Imagine wrapping those planks right around that. It just, you wouldn't do it.
Right. So is there any downside to having a pram bow?
No, other than the occasional person comes up and says, I don't like that. But that's their problem,
Yeah, right.
And there are tens of thousands of Mirror and Optimist and Fireball and San Francisco Bay Pelicans, all with pram bows. Chinese were doing it for 5,000 years, pram bows.
Interesting. Yeah. So what about a wave coming right at the boat in high seas? Is that just going to bounce off the bow, and will that slow the boat down or do anything?
It's very unusual circumstances for the wave to be high enough. Bear in mind that the boat will float up the face of the wave. This is a very buoyant little boat.
I see.
So it will bounce over the wave rather than butt into it. It's not long enough to butt into it.
Okay. So it would take a very special kind of like a 10-foot chop or something real unusual.
You can get short, steep harbour chops where they're breaking, and you'll get some light contact with that pram bow. And the guys tell me that there's just this splash radiating away from it. They don't feel it. It's not a thump. It doesn't slow it down, but there's a little bit of spray radiates off it, and it doesn't come on board. It's thrown out far enough.
I see. Okay. Very
and this
cool.
comes from the guys who did the Everglades Challenge in Mike Money's Red one. And Mike tells me that sailing towards the sun into a steep, heavy chop, says it was like a little rainbow every 15 seconds.
Really? Funny. So what's the Everglades Challenge, John? I've heard about that.
The Everglades Challenge runs from Tampa in Florida down the west coast of the Florida Peninsula through a series of checkpoints, which are gates which really set the size and nature of the boat that you run, under bridges, which means the mast has to come down, up narrow creeks, which means it has to be rowable, those sorts of things. They are controls effectively on the boat types, and it goes right down round the corner past, now I think it's Flamingo Harbour, right down in the bottom of the Everglades National Park, and then across the bottom to Key Largo. So it's 300 miles, and the weather can be horrific. But
how did the Scamp do in that?
the Scamp did extremely well. It was lying in 4th place in the monohull sailing division when the guys made a navigational choice that put them aground in an area which was literally tens of miles in extent and ankle-deep water. The wind had blown all the water out of the bay because there's very little tide there, only inches of tide, and they ran aground and they were stuck there for 4 days.
Oh, that kind of slowed things down.
It slowed things down. The mud was liquid and they couldn't walk in it. They had to lie down and swim through the mud to get to a channel, to get a line to a boat to haul it out in the end. But they stayed on board for, I think, the better part of 4 days. Andrew left. They got Andrew off after a couple of days, and Mike stayed there for about 4 days, and then they towed the boat out. The water came back, all 3 or 4 inches of it.
Well, boy, for that boat to run aground, it's got to be pretty shallow.
It was very shallow.
Because the draft is, what, 4 inches?
5 or 6.
5 or 6, yeah. Wow, but interesting.
Prior to that, they were sailing in company with some boats up around the 20 feet mark to windward in very heavy, nasty weather. It had been a horrifying trip. But the boat, Jackie Bunnies, Mike's lady, put on the internet when she saw them come into the first checkpoint. Everyone was coming in, everything was wet, the boats were full of water, they had damage, and she said that the Red Scamp sailed in, there was no gear in sight, it was all dry stored in the lockers. The guys looked comfortable and dry. They sailed in, they turned the boat round, and they sailed back out again.
I love it.
She said she knew then that the boat was competitive and it was going to make it.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. That is amazing. So what hull number was that boat? That was, do you know?
That hasn't officially got
it hasn't.
A hull number, but it would have been second one in the water.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how well does a Scamp point into the wind?
Surprisingly
Does it sail close to the wind?
Yeah, surprisingly well.
Okay.
We were sailing on Saturday with the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building's birthday party.
Yeah.
There were a number of people out there in flat-bottom skiffs about 14 feet. And me being a bit naughty on it, I had a couple of people on board and I wanted to show them how it performed. So I sailed through their lee, pointed up and pointed out to windward of them, jibed around, chased around the back, jibed around their stern and sailed through their lee again. Literally sailed a circle around them.
Oh, really?
And it was pointing 10, 12 degrees higher than they were.
Really?
The balanced lug sail is a very efficient sail.
Yeah, okay.
Much more so than people realise.
Yeah.
And it's a very low labour input sail. I can't imagine a situation where you'd need more than one hand on the main sheet.
Yeah. Boy, I like that. That's my kind of boat. Have you built a Scamp yourself, John?
No.
Are you going to?
I'm learning now.
Oh, okay, that's right. You're building 10
I'm going to this course, you know.
That's right. You're learning how to build your own boat. That's right.
But my wife wants me to build her one.
Oh, really?
And she's not a sailor, so that's a real change.
Yeah, yeah. So when's the next Scamp Camp that you'll be involved in, John?
I'm booked for next August.
Okay.
But
here in Port Townsend?
Yes.
Yep.
We'll do the same one again, another 10 boats.
Yep.
And there's a hint that there's going to be one in March, and we'll have a look at that. And if we can make it work, it's fairly costly to get me up here.
Yeah.
If we can make it work, I'll be back.
Yeah. You're not moving out here, are you?
No, I'm not sure that Homeland Security would want me. Yeah. Member of a subversive organisation, the traditional small craft society.
Yeah, that's a big red flag right there, isn't it? Yeah, interesting. How many Scamps are actually fully built, functioning? Do you know?
I think there's probably 8 or 10.
8 or 10.
Yeah,
really?
But there are quite a lot getting quite close.
Yeah, okay.
The design hasn't been out there for very long yet, about 18 months.
Okay.
And there's just not time. People generally take a year to 18 months to build.
Yeah.
Now, the bulk of the plans went out after the last Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival a year ago.
Oh, really?
So there are a lot of those, even if they all got built, but there are a lot of those will only be partway through.
Yeah. So, how many plans have been sold, versus kits?
I'm not sure about that. Josh would be the man to answer it, but
Okay.
I understand that they're well past 200 in terms of plans.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, or at least whole numbers.
Yeah, right.
So I'm not sure how many kits have been sold, but I know that, for example, Howard is set up to do the one in Michigan, and he's got 4 kits coming for that.
Okay. And that's in October, I think, right? Yeah. Okay. So it seems like interest is really picking up in this boat.
This has been amazing.
It's just taken off, isn't it?
There's no other boat even remotely like it. It's really off the wall in terms of how it's put together, but it fits so many people's needs.
Yeah. And in this, it seems like the whole minimalist theory of life has kind of caught some ground here in the last few years, and people want more out of less.
Yeah, well,
type of thing. And
I watch the tiny cabin websites, and they're wonderful. There's some amazing tiny little residences being built. Some sit on trailers and some sit in trees, and you're talking
10 by 20 house.
Oh no, we're talking 8 by 12, and those sorts of things. But 10 by 20 houses.
Yeah,
and it makes the old shotgun house look like a mansion.
Yeah, interesting.
But this is happening with boats as well, and this is the growth area in boating.
Yeah,
is the semi-traditional micro cruisers, all the way from a thing like SCAMP up to about maybe 18 or 20 feet. All right, the rules seem to be tow it with a 4-cylinder car, store it in a single car garage, and it has to be low maintenance and easily handled.
Yeah, single-handed, don't need power if you don't want it.
Yeah,
because this is a good rowboat too, right?
They row surprisingly well for such a fat little creature.
Yeah, so you can get in and out of harbors if you don't want to sail, or if you lose your wind, you can row and get around that way. Yeah. So now you're here in Port Townsend until just after the Wooden Boat Festival.
The day after.
Yeah. Are you going to be presenting or doing anything at the festival, John?
I'll be doing joint presentations with Howard.
Okay.
Last year I had slots of my own, which were pretty successful.
Yeah.
But this year I'm going to be spending some time looking at the exhibits, meeting up with friends, all the things I didn't have time to do last time.
Yeah. Okay.
I was swamped last time.
Okay.
Absolutely mobbed.
Yeah, especially that was the first time the SCAMP was at the show, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Well, what presentations are you and Howard doing at the show?
We're doing presentations on small craft seamanship.
Oh, really?
Right. So small boat cruising, small craft seamanship. We'll visit subjects like navigation, capsize self-rescue, safety equipment, provisioning, all those sorts of things, anchoring.
Yeah. So there's probably not a very good chance Howard will reveal his cruise next year, what he's doing, right?
Yeah, he's being very, very secretive about that.
He's a pretty secretive guy about that stuff. But that's okay, I guess.
Yep.
We'll hear about it afterwards, I'm sure.
Well, I know where he's going, and I'm going to be holding my breath, but I'm absolutely admiring him.
There's only like 3 people in the world that know, I think. You and his wife and somebody else. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've had people bribe me. Can you get it out of Howard? We'll pay you money.
No.
It's not going to happen, I don't think.
No.
So, well, thanks for your time today, John. Any other comments for people listening today?
Well, it's really good to be here. I'm having a really good time, thoroughly enjoying myself, learning lots. The best possible way of learning something is to teach it. And I'm, just so glad to be here.
Cool.
Very, very good. And it's summertime here. It's wintertime where I come from.
Oh, right.
So I'm avoiding the worst of that.
Yeah.
Left my poor wife to deal with that on her own.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay, well, thanks for your time, John.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, it is August 9th, 2012, and I am sitting next to a gentleman I just met today, Cliff Sell. Cliff, welcome to the podcast today.
Welcome to you.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. And so you're here attending the SCAMP Camp, which is pretty cool. So tell me, where are you from? And how did you get interested in boats?
Well, right now I live in Fürth, Germany. I used to live here in Spokane, Washington, so we used to go to the Wooden Boat Festival
every
fall. And,
Here in
that's
Port
what-
Townsend
yeah,
or
here
in Seattle?
No, here in Port Townsend.
Yeah.
And for years I've been wanting to build a little pram, like that nutshell pram here.
Yeah.
So when my wife discovered the class and said, "Hey Cliff, you wanted to build a boat. Here's a class on boat building and we'll be in the US at that time anyway," we signed up. So
Really?
I'm very excited.
Yeah. So how did you find the class online?
I have no idea how she found it.
Really?
No, I think she was just looking what's happening in Port Townsend while we're there.
Okay, very good. So you live in Germany, but you've spent quite a bit of time in the States, you said.
Yeah. My father's from Kansas City.
Okay, yeah. So how did you get interested in boating originally? Did you boat when you were a kid with your family and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, boated as a kid.
What kind of boating were you doing?
Motorboating and sailboating, usually in the Mediterranean,
Oh, really?
because we lived in Germany and that's the nearest warm ocean.
Yeah, okay.
But also in the English Channel, which is a real nightmare because of the tides. The tides are unbelievable.
Really? Huge tides, huh?
Yeah, you have maybe 30 feet tide differences.
Kidding.
Yeah, between low tide and high tide.
Oh, my goodness. That can cause some serious problems.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. So, did your family, when you were boating as a kid, were they some of them wooden boats that you were on? What kind of boats were they? Do you remember?
Well, a wooden schooner, a 50-foot wooden schooner,
Okay.
built by a Swiss shipwright. And so that's where we spent most of the time sailing on.
I see. Very cool. So you were telling me earlier you own a 50-foot schooner yourself.
Exactly, the family.
Yeah, the
We
family
all
does.
pooled
Is that
together.
the same boat you're talking about? Okay.
yeah.
So tell me about that boat, the history of it, and the construction and that stuff.
Well, a Swiss ship carpenter around Lake Geneva basically collected wood, the nicest piece of wood, for a long time. I don't know how long. And when he was in his 50s, he started building a boat. And he built this boat for a long time and wanted to sail around the world alone, didn't have a partner or anything. And right when he was done with the boat, he met a ballet dancer and fell in love with her. And something very tragic happened, which was she said, "It's either me or the boat." And so he made a mistake. He sold off the boat and supposedly, now I'm not sure if that's a fact or not, supposedly he died 3 months later.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. So, oh, man, that's kind of like the worst of all worlds, huh? Yeah, so how long has that boat been in your family then?
Oh, now for about 20 years.
20 years,
20 years,
wow.
yeah.
So is it do you know how it's constructed, the hull and stuff? Is it a Carvel planked boat with mahogany planking?
It's mahogany.
Yeah.
It's composite.
Okay,
Right? So it has a rounded shape.
yeah.
And it's very sturdy because he wanted to sail around the world alone, so it's very sturdy.
Yeah.
We just had some worms in it, and so we're working with a professional carpenter on it, and he basically said it's the best built boat he's ever seen.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
I guess when a carpenter built a boat for him. So he says even in points you'll never see, the joinery is perfect and everything.
Wow.
I guess whenever he was, in his later years when he was not building on somebody else's boat and had time for his own boat, he did it with a lot of love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the guy that built it, did he design it also, or was it somebody else's design, do you know?
I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
I'm not really sure.
And you have that boat in the water in Spain, you were saying, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you get out on your 50-foot schooner. So you were coming to Port Townsend for vacation, and your wife found the SCAMP class, and you'd never heard of a SCAMP, probably.
Well, she found it about a month before we came.
Okay. Yeah.
We didn't just walk in.
Yeah. Right.
And then I did a little research on the boat
Yeah.
and found that John Welsford had put a lot of thought into the boat.
Yeah.
With a ballast tank, with a water ballast, with it basically being a very safe boat. And I have a daughter that's 9 and a son that's 2, so I'm interested in a boat that's very safe, that the kid is less likely to fall off than on a laser, for example.
Yeah.
You can't sail a laser with a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, not a small kid. at
Right.
least. So I was looking for a boat that would work for kids.
Yeah. Okay. So what else do you like about the boat, Cliff? What are some other things that...
I like the pram bow.
Okay.
I'm actually surprised that seems to create talk, because I've always liked a pram bow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that it doesn't have stuff on it you don't need. You know, When you're used to a 50-foot schooner, there's a lot of stuff on the boat that I've probably never seen.
Oh.
Just because I don't need it in daily task, and I don't even know it's there.
Right.
And so I like to have a boat where everything that's there is something I know what it is, I know how it works, I know what it's for, and I'm not carrying around extra stuff that just adds additional hassle.
Mm-hmm. It's a pretty simple design, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So now the boat's self-bailing, right?
Yep.
Yeah. It's got a couple scuppers in the transom. Is that what you call them? Scuppers? I think that's correct. I don't know. My nautical terminology has improved, but it's still not perfect. But anyway, there's a couple holes in the transom where the water that gets in on the deck can drain back, or in the cockpit area, right? And so when you finish the class, it's about a 2-week class, I understand. You'll have a boat that's 80% complete, something like that?
I don't think so. I don't think so. The last 10% take the other half of the time.
Yeah, that's right.
So
yeah.
I'm actually staying a week longer to get some more work done on it.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, 2 or 3 of us are staying a couple of days longer to do more work on it.
I see.
And then I'll ship it to Germany.
Okay, so you're going to ship the boat over to Germany from here and sail it. Now, what kind of waterways will you sail the boat in there?
Small lakes.
Small lakes, okay.
Small lakes.
Yeah.
Or, cool. Small lakes, maybe, I don't know, a mile by half a mile, something like that.
Yeah, so I see.
Typical German inland lakes that we have.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. What color are you going to paint your boat?
Well, that is really funny. The first night after attending the class, right, I barely slept all night because I was thinking about what color I would take.
Oh, really?
And I still haven't picked one.
You still haven't?
No. Right now it would be probably burgundy into the waterline.
Yeah.
Below the waterline, burgundy, and then above the waterline, probably some kind of off-white. That's not as blinding as a true white.
Yeah.
I like the two-tone paint on Scamp number 1.
Mm-hmm.
With the darker beige and the off-white.
Are you going to do any varnishing on yours, on any of the trim on the deck or anything?
A little bit, yeah. Bulkhead number 3.
Yeah.
I'm keeping in wood.
Okay.
That's the one the match is attached to.
Yeah.
And I'm also thinking about taking the backs of the seats and keeping the wood there. See,
that would be nice.
A little bit of bright work, but not too much.
Yeah. So it's not so much work.
Yeah. I'm used to painting bright work, and a 50-foot schooner has a lot of bright work.
Does it?
So,
that takes
less
time.
bright work is maybe a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. Very cool. Well,
just a nice looking boat.
It is. It's a cool. We're sitting here. For those of you that aren't here, we're sitting here looking at the prototype Scamp that was built, I think, 2 years ago, either 2 or 3 years ago, by Josh Colvin and a couple people. And the hull was painted a real nice greenish, dark green color, and then a beige. The sides are beige, and the deck is or off-white, I guess you'd say, and the deck itself is beige. So how's the class going so far, Cliff?
Very nice. It's fun to work with other people. Some people are really pickier than I am, and some people are faster going than I am, and so it's just nice to see how others would approach a particular task. It's really nice with some of the work to have 6 or 8 hands.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can do it with 4 hands, but it's just less effort with 6 hands.
Yeah.
So at home, I don't have a workshop full of people who want to help.
Okay.
And similarly, it's nice helping other people with their boat and just moving them along and seeing 9 boats emerge at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It's very motivating.
Yeah, very cool. Have you built a boat before, Cliff?
Only model boats.
Really? Yeah. So this is your first real boat build. So you're learning a lot, huh?
Yes.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah,
so would you recommend the class to others, Cliff? People that are interested?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think you learn a lot about woodworking, taking care of your tools, sharpening tools, how to work with epoxy. It's not as bad as everybody says. It doesn't smell a bit, at least the type of epoxy we're using here.
Yeah.
And you learn a lot, you have fun, and at the end you get to take home a boat. You can't beat that.
Yeah, exactly. Very good. Well, I appreciate your time today, Cliff. Any parting comments for our listeners?
I really look forward to sailing it, and I'm noticing everybody has different motives. Some people are in for the build, which is exciting. Others can't wait to go sailing, which is exciting.
Yeah.
And so I think the Scamp is the kind of boat that will make a lot of people happy for a lot of different reasons.
Cool. Very good. Well, thanks for your time today, Cliff. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Dan.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Cliff, for doing that interview. Send me, if you get this, if you listen to this podcast, which I hope you do, shoot me a picture of your scamp when you get it done. I would love to see it. I'll throw it up on the website. That would be pretty cool. And thanks to you too, John, for giving us some more insight on the scamp and some of the special features and what that pram bow does and all that stuff. Pretty fun stuff. Really appreciate it, guys. That's about it for today's show. If you would like to help support the show, you can do so by going to my website, clicking on the resources page, clicking on any item there from Amazon, and that takes you to Amazon, and then you can purchase basically anything on the site. I get paid a small commission. Also, if you go to my homepage, there's a button there for Jamestown Distributors, which sells marine and boat building supplies. They have great prices, fast shipping. It's a good outfit. If you make a purchase after clicking on that button, I get paid a little bit. If you like the podcast, please leave a review in iTunes. And also, I have a store on my website now where you can buy things like T-shirts, mugs, flip-flops, phone cases with the Hooked on Wooden Boats logo on it, which I'm pretty proud of. I think it's a pretty cool logo. If you go to my website and you look at the top, at the menus, you can click on Store to get there, or you can go on hookedonwoodenboats.com/store. Well, until next week, I hope you have a good week. I hope you're getting out in the water in your wooden boat, or you're building a wooden boat, or refinishing a wooden boat. If you've never built a wooden boat before, it's time to think about getting started, do some planning. Send me some questions. If I can help, I will. There's all kinds of ways to build wooden boats. You can do it from a kit. You can do it from scratch. You can design your own. You can buy a book and build one. It's just a lot of fun. And when you get all done with the project, you go, wow, I made this thing. And it actually floats. So it's pretty cool stuff. Anyway, keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. This is Wooden Boat Dan, over and out. Have a great week.